CNN Student News is back from a 3-day weekend. We hope everything is going well for you. I'm Carl Azus, and our first story today concerns a certain stimulus plan. It's America's most expensive stimulus bill ever, and President Obama is scheduled to sign it today. The U.S. House and Senate have passed a $787 billion measure intended to give a serious booster shot to the U.S. economy. Some say it'll work, some say it won't. Everyone will find out in the months and years ahead. The government's planning to spend about 65% of this money on everything from bridges, roads, and buildings to unemployment benefits and food stamps. The other 35% will come in the form of tax cuts, adding up to about $13 extra a week in a person's paycheck. Well, do you remember field trips? For some of you, they're a thing of the past with school budget cuts. AP classes, art and music programs, summer school, all of this could disappear as education suffers in the recession. There is hope, though, that the stimulus could help out. Kate Baldwin explains how as she takes us to one of the many schools that could use some cash.
The new Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, toured an Arlington, Virginia high school to make the pitch for why education dollars matter in the stimulus package.
There's nothing more important we can do than create facilities that our students need to learn and reach their full potential.
About $80 billion of the total $787 billion package goes toward K-12 public education. We went to Arlington School Superintendent Rob Smith to find out what that money means to his district.
What in this school, as an example, could you use with stimulus dollars?
We know we need to do some work with the roof system.
Okay.
We know we need to put in a sprinkler system.
Okay.
And we know we need to rework the entire heating, ventilation, air conditioning system. And that's the work that needs to be done. We know what we need to do, so we're ready to spend the money.
Smith says even without considering construction costs, Arlington schools are facing an $11 to $18 million budget shortfall this year. And they're looking at cutting everything from school books to buses to staff to make ends meet. Education leaders say school districts across the country are making the same painful decisions.
Our school boards tell us that they are facing shortages in terms of teacher layoffs, cutting programs. It's not just nice to do programs. It's the very core of teaching. It's the very core of raising student achievement.
And the very core of the argument for education stimulus dollars. But some experts, like Frederick Hess of the conservative think tank American Enterprise Institute, says without reform, any additional funding is throwing good money at a broken system.
Unfortunately, what we see in this package is what we've done for 40 years in education, which is more of everything. More technology, no guarantees that we're even going to think about how to use it to increase productivity.
Superintendent Smith disagrees. He says long-term change can't begin if they don't survive the short term.
Arlington Public Schools, like districts across the country, is still waiting to hear how much money it might get from the stimulus. This is one of the district's 34 schools you can be sure is fighting for its own piece of the pie. Kate Baldwin, CNN, Arlington, Virginia.
See if you can ID me. I'm a government organization whose mission is to provide the world's best aerospace system. I was formally created in 1958 to make airline flying less hazardous. When you fly in a plane, you fly by my rules. The Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, does everything from improving flight safety to issuing pilots' licenses.
An FAA spokeswoman says the agency has given more than 100 directives since 1994 on the subject of icing and flying in icy conditions. Investigators believe that ice buildup could have been the reason why Continental Connection Flight 3407 crashed on Thursday night, killing all 49 passengers and one person on the ground. Ines Ferre describes where and how this tragedy occurred.
It was a frightening fall from the sky for everyone on board Flight 3407. Investigators now say the plane dropped 800 feet in 5 seconds just before it slammed into a house in a Buffalo suburb. Just 26 seconds before the crash, the plane went into violent jerking motions, pitching and rolling before banking a sharp 105 degrees to the right. Investigators also revealed that the plane had been running on autopilot just before it crashed.
in icing conditions, it might be best to disengage the autopilot and fly the airplane manually so that you have the manual feel for what might be changing in your flight regime because of the ice.
The National Transportation Safety Board says that in the past, it's advised against running on autopilot in severe icing conditions, but the conditions that night were not specified as severe. And NTSB officials say it's the FAA that calls the shots when it comes to autopilot regulations.
In this one situation, the FAA sees things a little differently than we do because they see that for some reasons, that you may need to be flying with the autopilot. Workload is one of those.
Freezing temperatures and piles of wreckage have slowed attempts to find the remains of all 50 of the crash victims.
I can't help but think of the pain and suffering that all the families are going through.
While investigators do their work, a local resident made room for flowers at this makeshift memorial site outside a church, just blocks away from where the plane went down.
Time for the shout out. Who's the president of Venezuela? If you think you know it, shout it out. Is it Evo Morales, Michelle Bachelet, Felipe Calderon, or Hugo Chavez? You've got 3 seconds. Go! Hugo Chavez has been Venezuela's leader since 1999. That's your answer, and that's your shout out.
Could Hugo Chavez, who's 54 years old, stay in power for the rest of his life? Some Venezuelans just had to consider that. Like the United States, the South American country has term limits for its president. Chavez, who in the past has spoken out against the U.S. and the United Nations, would have been done with his second and last term in 2012. But Morgan Neal reports from the Venezuelan capital that Chavez may be in charge years after that.
After a hard-fought campaign, Venezuela awakened Monday to the new reality that the principal political figure in the country, Hugo Chavez, may maintain that position beyond 2012. The results came in late Sunday night on a referendum to do away with term limits, allowing President Hugo Chavez and other elected officials to run for re-election as long as they can keep winning. President Hugo Chavez didn't wait long to celebrate.
Victoria! Victoria! Victoria!
Victory! Victory! Popular victory! This is a clear victory for the people, a clear victory for the revolution.
Also in that victory speech, President Chavez responded to accusations that he was trying to maintain his grip on power indefinitely, saying that nothing is forever, only God and Venezuela, in his words. Now, what will this vote mean moving forward? Well, for President Chavez, it'll mean a great deal of confidence as he moves ahead with what he calls his Bolivarian revolution. For the opposition, it means they now have 4 years till the next presidential election to try and define themselves as something other than those who are opposed to the policies of President Hugo Chavez. Morgan Neal, CNN, Caracas.
No criminal charges for Michael Phelps. Though a recently published photo appeared to show the Olympian smoking marijuana at a party in November, a South Carolina sheriff says the photo's not enough, that there's simply not enough evidence to prosecute him or anyone who was at the party. Phelps' reaction?
Realized that I have made a mistake and a bad judgment, and you know, this is something that I need to learn from, I will learn from, and have learned from. And you know, I think from now on, you know, it's you know, for me to try to get a message across to kids. You know, I know that you know, a lot of people make mistakes, and you know, the best way to learn from them is, you know, changing things.
All right, now, before we go today, even the guy who recorded this doesn't know what it is. Eddie Garcia was just trying to cover a race on Sunday morning when he caught fire in the sky. What looks like a rare daylight meteor was accompanied by sonic booms. That's what happens when something exceeds the speed of sound. Some thought it could have been what was left of 2 satellites that collided last week, but officials nixed that theory, so you'll have to decide for yourself whether it's something meteor than a meteor. We hope you'll decide to drop in on us again Wednesday for CNN Student News. I'm Carl Azus.